rang, but it just wasn't very loud or something. Hello, glad to be back on Wednesday night. Thank you to Stuart for covering last week. Tonight we are moving on in the biblical story. We're going to be taking a look at Joshua 2 and 7. We're going to be looking at two characters, Rahab and Achan, and we're going to be looking at them side by side. Now, just as a way of context in the book of Joshua, we are immediately after Moses' death. Joshua is leading Israel. God's pointing them to the promised land. All Israel needs to do is go in and conquer. The first stop on their conquest is the city known as Jericho. And we all know the story about how they marched 7 times round. There's the little kid story and everything. We're not talking so much about the actual marching 7 times round part, but really what happens before with Rahab and what happens after with Achan. So let's just jump right in. Joshua chapter 2, verse 1. We read, Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. And they went and came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. So, some things that we don't know, and the story doesn't really get into for us. We don't know why Joshua felt the need to send spies into Jericho if all they did was march 7 times round. Don't know why they needed to go in there. Don't know why they needed to check the land out or anything. But Joshua does that anyways, and we get no further comment on it. The second thing we don't understand is why they end up at a prostitute's house. Don't know, but they do. Instead, we're focusing now on Rahab. From this verse alone, what do we know about Rahab? At least 3 details I think we can find from this passage. All right, Stuart pretty much nailed it. I didn't say she's a woman, I just said her name is Rahab, so maybe 4 things, right? So, her name's Rahab, she's a woman, she's in Jericho. What does that make her? Gentile. And then her profession, prostitute. In fact, the way this verse is written, the house of a prostitute, that's the first thing the biblical author wants us to get first. They're at a prostitute's house, and her name is Rahab. And so let's go ahead and figure out how would the Israelites, how would God have viewed a Gentile prostitute living in the city that is target number 1 for Israel? First, we can look at a passage like Leviticus 19:29, where we see that prostitution defiles both the woman and the land. God says, do not profane your daughter by making her a prostitute, lest the land fall into prostitution and the land become full of depravity. So prostitution is just never a good thing in the biblical story. It could sometimes, in some occasions, even be punished by death. For example, in Leviticus 21, verse 9, the daughter of any priest, if she profanes herself by whoring, profanes her father, she shall be burned with fire. There was another, not a prostitute, but one who dressed like a prostitute, who was threatened with burning by fire. Does anyone remember that story? Tamar, right? She, in some long convoluted story, seduces Judah, her father-in-law, and she gets pregnant. Judah's all in a huff. Let's burn this woman. And she says, well, I was pregnant by whoever's seal, cord, and staff I'm holding. Lo and behold, it was Judah's. And he says, she's more righteous than I am. Don't understand that story completely, but there it is. So throughout Scripture, prostitution and whoring, as we read of in 21:9 here, is used as a picture to condemn Israel's unfaithfulness. For example, in the book of Hosea. Hosea is God's prophet, and God says, Hosea, go and marry a whore. That's how the ESV translates it. I know some people are a little iffy about using the word whore, but it is supposed to be a strong and kind of icky image. Go and marry a whore, have children through her. 2 of those 3 children don't even know if they're Hosea's. And she goes off, she commits adultery, and God says, go marry her again. and understand this is exactly what I'm going through with the entire nation of Israel. Proverbs, if we read through those first 9 chapters, we are supposed to embrace woman wisdom, but who are we supposed to avoid at all times? The seductive woman, the adulteress, the strange woman. And so prostitution is not a compliment. Whoring is not a good thing in Israel. And so that alone is a pretty big strike against Rahab. But the second strike is pretty significant as well. She is a Gentile. And what did God command Israel to do as they went on their conquest through the Promised Land? What were they to do with all the Gentiles in Canaan? Completely eradicate. All the people of Canaan were to be, to use a technical term within the Bible, devoted to destruction is the phrase you'll see a lot in the ESV. In Joshua 6:21, here they are actually invading Jericho. Then they devoted all in the city to destruction, both men and women, young and old, oxen, sheep, donkeys, with the edge of the sword. Devoted to destruction is just a single word in Hebrew, haram. And if that sounds familiar, it is related to the Islamic word haram, that which is forbidden, that which is off limits. And so anyone who God placed under destruction, under haram, God said you are to completely destroy them, show absolutely no mercy, and you cannot get out of this. In Leviticus 27:29, no one devoted who is to be devoted for destruction from mankind shall be ransomed. He shall surely be put to death. So when God puts the haram stomp on someone's head, you can't get out of it. That person cannot plead for mercy. They can't be ransomed. They can't run to a city of refuge. That person is put to death. If an entire people, like the nation of Jericho, for example, were to be devoted to destruction, God says when he gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. And what this did is it sort of functioned as an offering or sacrifice to God. Again, going back to Jericho, Joshua says the city and all that is within it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. But you keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest when you have devoted them, you take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction and bring trouble upon it. So, devoting to destruction is a very serious thing. Does anyone remember why Saul, first king of Israel, was rejected as king? Yeah. He was going against the Amalekites, I believe it was. This is 1 Samuel chapter 15. And God says, you are to devote to destruction. Man, woman, young, old, oxen, sheep, donkey, all of it. And so when Samuel comes up to visit the war camp, Saul says, I've obeyed the word of the Lord. I have completely devoted to destruction all the Amalekites. And there's that famous phrase I love from Samuel, what then is this bleating of sheep and lowing of cows that I hear? And then he takes a sword himself and slaughters King Agag, devoting them to destruction. So this is a big deal. If you don't devote something to destruction that God says you devote to destruction, you're going to end up like Saul, rejected by God. So in sum, here we have Rahab. Does she have any place among God's people as a Gentile prostitute under the destruction? Doesn't sound like it to me. She profanes the land that will soon be holy to God and his people. She is to be devoted to destruction with no hope of escape. Another little side note here. Notice that the spies had left from a city called Shittim. Shittim is where the people of Israel began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So they're leaving from the place where it was made very clear why they don't deal with foreign women, especially foreign prostitutes. They lead Israel into idolatry and into sin and get people like Phineas throwing spears at people. So we're reading this story at this point. Would we ever expect Rahab to be among God's people? If we hadn't read the story before, we might think, ooh, that's a little shifty. Yet, she is the hero of our story. So we want to dig into Rahab a little bit more. How does Rahab go from a profane, devoted to destruction Gentile to the hero of our story? Starting in verse 2, it was told to the king of Jericho, behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. I guess the spies aren't very good spies. Verse 3, then the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, true, the men came to me, and I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued after them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords, and the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone out. Before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord, that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign, that you will save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. And the men said to her, our life for yours, even to death. If you do not tell this business of ours, then when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. And then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. And she said to them, go into the hills, where the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned, and then afterwards you may go on your way. So, verses 3 through 5, Rahab sends Jericho's king's men on a wild goose chase. I don't know where they came from. They left it dark. I don't know what way they went. But if you chase them, you might catch on to them. And all of that is shown to be a lie. In verses 6 and 7, she knows they're on the roof. She knows she's sending the guards in the wrong direction. She knows Jericho isn't going to be able to put up a fight with God on Israel's side. And so her request to the spies is, save me, save my family, and all who belong to them. The spies take it upon themselves to swear an oath that they will live just as they do. Interesting, because God had prevented oaths being made to those who were devoted to destruction. So we have this story. Why is Rahab spared? What do we notice about Rahab's character, faith, and commitment from this story that we've just read? Yeah. She had heard about God. In fact, she's using the covenant name Yahweh, not your God or just the God of Israel. We've heard about Yahweh. And as a result, we're terrified. She says, our hearts have melted in with us. We heard about how you crossed the Red Sea. We heard about what you did to the other kings on the other side of the Jordan. And we know what it means to be devoted to destruction. And so as a result, like Jackie says, they know who God is. God of heaven and earth. Austin.
I think the understanding, they all heard what had happened. They were all terrified.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems that she's the one who understood what it meant and acted on that invitation
them were just as frightened as she was. But for some reason, they decided, no, we're still going to trust in our walls and our spears and all that good stuff. She's the one who took that fear and actually did something with it. We're looking a little bit ahead, but if you were to look at James chapter 2, Rahab is compared with the demons. James says the demons believe God. They know who he is. And what do they do as a result? They tremble, they shudder, they're terrified. But then he says, but later on there's Rahab. And Rahab says, we were all terrified. But Rahab's the only one who did anything. So Rahab, oh, go ahead, Stuart.
I think the other thing that you mentioned about Rahab thoroughly lying, and lying about God. So how do you justify that? I think you justify it the same way that the two Hebrew midwives didn't kill the Hebrew boys whenever they came out of the womb. And they lied about why that happened. And God blessed them because that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's a somewhat a harder concept to get through, but basically you still have to do what's right. And lying is what ends up being the right answer to save lives. Which is.
There are a few passages, two of them at least I know of in Ephesians and also in Romans chapter 12, where Paul writes about this idea that we who have the Spirit need to be able to discern what the will of God is. And I think this is a good example of that. It would be very easy for us to just kind of put up a black and white understanding. Lying is wrong. And so, the classic conundrum, the Nazis knock on your door and you're hiding Jews in the attic or something or the basement. Well, you can't lie, so you have to give them up, right? Well, that's not actually discerning the will of God, I think. And I think this is the perfect example of that. Notice what she says. Let's see. Verse 12. Please swear to me by the Lord that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house. Austin?
That's that act of faith. She dealt kindly with them without knowing if they would save her. It wasn't like hey, they're knocking on my door, they're going to ask you where you are, so I'm going to blackmail you into saying that I'll be okay. Otherwise, I'll tell them. No, I'm going to send them away. I'm going to save your life. Now, please return.
Now, this word kindness, kindly, is not just the idea of being nice. It is that very, very important Hebrew word, hesed, which is often translated as steadfast love, unfailing loyalty. It is one of those words that God defines himself by. Exodus 34:6, the Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. I don't know why the ESV translators decided to go with kindly. It's steadfast love. It is loyalty. It is dedication. It is one of those things we looked at on Sunday that the Lord delights in. I am the Lord who practices steadfast love, kindness, unfailing love, justice, and righteousness in the earth. And so here's Rahab, and that's what she's demonstrating. She is saying, I am no longer loyal to my people. She has literally repented. She has turned from the old way, the old loyalties, given exclusive allegiance to God, and says, I'm on your side, no matter how much risk that might be. There's a small detail. She sends the king's men out at dark, and the gates immediately close. Spies can't get out unless she helps them. And so she has to decide, am I going to be loyal to these spies right now, or am I going to hand them over when they can't escape? And she chose to be like God. She chose to be on God's side. And as a result, we do get passages like James 2:25. Was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works? And what are those works? when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way. It was lying to the king of Jericho and protecting the spies that justified her. Hebrews 11:31, by faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. She is someone who is friendly to them. She is an example of faith. One last detail that we're just going to mention, but not explain just yet. Behold, when we come into the land, you shall tie the scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and you shall gather into your house your father and mother, your brothers, and all your father's household. The scarlet cord is one of those things that just kind of sets fire to plenty of people's imaginations. It's the blood of Christ, and the house is the body of Christ, and she's in it, so she's saved. Kind of cute, right? Okay, sure, whatever. But we're not exploring the significance of this just yet, but I do want you all to just remember, hey, yeah, Rahab did the scarlet cord thing. So, later on in Joshua chapter 6, after marching 7 times round in a day, we're told that the two men who had spied out the land, Joshua said, go into the prostitute's house, bring out from there a woman and all who belong to her, as you swore to her. So the young men who had been spies went in, brought out Rahab and her father and mother and brothers and all who belonged to her, and they brought all her relatives and put them outside the camp of Israel. But Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive. And she has lived in Israel to this day because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. I think it's really important that before we get into the long conquest that Israel has throughout the Promised Land, the first story we're told is Rahab. Because one of the big complaints that people have about God is that what he did to the Canaanites is genocide. Doesn't it sound like genocide? Kill old, young, male, female, all animals, all people, everything? Sounds like genocide to me. Ethnic cleansing, right? And so people just look at that and go like, oh, God's disgusting. He's a moral monster. What does Rahab tell us, though? So Rahab heard everything that everyone in Jericho had heard. Rahab was devoted to destruction and a prostitute, the furthest you could be away from God. But at the end of the story, she's living in Israel to this day, by the time Joshua was written. Do you think the rest of Jericho could have done the same thing? Do you think every other city could have done the same thing? I think in chapter 9, Israel comes across the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites are a little bit more trickier than Rahab. They deceive Joshua into making a covenant, and God says, okay, you made the promise without my consent or advice, but you got to honor it. Keep those people alive. You made a deal. God was willing to work with the people who were in the land, but the people in the land were never willing to work with God. And Rahab is one of those grand examples that show that you can never be so far away from God that you can't come back. God is willing to reach out to everyone who shows steadfast love to him and return his own steadfast love. So I think Rahab is a really important story. Answers the objections we might have in the rest of Joshua. So, anything on Rahab for the time being? Okay, let's fast forward to the end of the Jericho story. And let's talk about Achan. Achan and Rahab, they need to be read side by side. Rahab tells us what happens immediately before Jericho. Achan tells us what happens immediately after Jericho. Israel was told in Joshua 6:18, you keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest when you have devoted them, you take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction and bring trouble upon it. So all the devoted things go to God. Yet, in Joshua chapter 7, verse 1, the people of Israel broke faith in regard to the devoted things. For Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things, and the anger of the Lord burned against the people of Israel. So, just like we did with Rahab, what can you tell me about Achan from this verse alone? He's greedy. He's from the tribe of Judah. Now, in the 12 tribes, there's kind of a hierarchy, right? Judah is the fourth born son, but Reuben slept with his father's concubine. Simeon and Levi slaughtered Shechem and were a stain to their father's reputation, leaving Judah as the firstborn of Israel. That's why all the kings and the Messiah come from Judah. There's even a psalm that talks about that. If you read in Numbers chapter 1, guess which tribe is the largest? Judah. Guess which tribe in the book of Judges is always antsy for war and trying to defend and take care of everything? Judah. So Judah's very prominent, and that's where Achan's from. But as Veronica said, he's greedy. He takes the devoted things. So Israel starts the next battle for the city of Ai and loses. And God explains, there's someone faithless among you. Now, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the wrong verse. It is. That's not supposed to be chapter 2. It's supposed to be chapter 7. And I'm just kind of dumb sometimes. Joshua chapter 7, starting at verse 10. Joshua is mourning the defeat. I cannot get rid of this cough. Goodness. Joshua is mourning the defeat at Ai. And the Lord said in Joshua 7:10, "Get up. Why have you fallen on your face? Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant that I commanded them. They have taken some of the devoted things they have stolen and lied and put them among their own belongings." All right. Nope, we're still not on track. Yeah, so verse 16, skipping ahead. So Joshua rose early in the morning. They're going to investigate why they lost. We already know it's Achan, but Joshua has to find out. So Joshua rose early in the morning and brought Israel near tribe by tribe. And the tribe of Judah was taken. And he brought near the clans of Judah, and the clan of the Zerahites was taken. And he brought near the clan of the Zerahites man by man, and Zabdi was taken. And he brought near his household man by man, and Achan, the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was taken. Do you notice how much emphasis there is on Achan's pedigree here? Someone from the tribe of Judah, of Carmi, of Zabdi, of Zerah, of Judah, an Israelite did this. Verse 19, then Joshua said to Achan, "My son, give glory to the Lord, God of Israel, and give praise to him. And tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me." And Achan answered Joshua, "Truly, I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and this is what I did. When I saw among the spoil a beautiful cloak from Shinar, and 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, then I coveted them and took them. And see, they are hidden in the earth inside my tent with the silver underneath." So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and behold, it was hidden in his tent with the silver underneath. And they took them out of the tent and brought them to Joshua and to all the people of Israel, and they laid them down before the Lord. And Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan the son of Zerah, and the silver and the cloak and the bar of gold, and his sons and daughters, and his oxen and donkeys and sheep, and his tent, and all that he had, and they brought them up to the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, "Why did you bring trouble on us? The Lord brings trouble on you today." And all Israel stoned him with stones. They burned them with fire and stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones that remains to this day. And then the Lord turned from his burning anger. Therefore, to this day, the name of that place is called the Valley of Achor. Achor and Achan in Hebrew are just the difference of one letter. So there's like a pun going on there. So here we have Achan. How does God punish Achan for his sin? Does he just put Achan to death? Who else suffers? His whole family. And, some people want to get, justify, well, if he hid it underneath his tent, that's a very public spot. The whole family must have been in cahoots with it. Okay, again, the Bible text is kind of silent on that. But his whole family, and we have at least 3 other victims, his oxen, his sheep, and his donkey, and his tent, and all that he had, doesn't it sound like Achan has been devoted to destruction, just like all the Gentile people? Notice these comparisons between Rahab and Achan, and, come on. Okay, a little glitchy, but whatever. We have Rahab and Achan, woman and a man, Canaanite, Israelite, should have died. Achan should have lived. Rahab saved her family. Achan's actions condemned them. She hid the spies. He hid the loot. She hid them on the roof. He hid everything under the tents. She fears Yahweh. He refuses to give God glory. She hears and believes. Achan has seen the acts of God, yet disobeys. Where was Rahab's house located? In the wall. What happened when Israel went marching 7 times round? The walls fell down, except for her house. It must have left standing. But we're told specifically that God burns Achan's tent. And then finally, Rahab becomes an Israelite. Achan becomes a Canaanite. So here's Rahab. You are never so far that you cannot become a child of God. And Achan teaches just the opposite. You are never so close to God that you can't be cast out because of your sin and rebellion. Think of Judas, one of the 12, hand-picked by Jesus. Yet he was devoted to destruction in his own way. Can never be so close that you can't fall away. Austin.
That you're kind of surprised that Jesus doesn't bring up in all of his teachings, and even John the Baptist, who would have been one, I think, to even bring this up with his straight to the point kind of talking of the pride and joy of the Pharisees was, well, we are children of Abraham, we are God's chosen people, and therefore we are right with God. And
God can raise up children of Abraham from these stones.
exactly, and the point is exactly this: God's people are those who obey, those who turn to God, not those who turn away from God, those who do as He asks, not those who hear and disobey.
So even as far back as Joshua, when Israel is at its most violent state against Gentiles, we still see God's overarching plan to bring those who are far near. That's what Ephesians is all about, right? God's plan to unite all things in Him. That's what He promised Abraham. Through you, all nations will be blessed, not just Israel. And so Rahab and Achan are already making a distinction of what a true child of God looks like. Israel wanted to rely purely along the ethnic lines. Rahab shows that you are a child of God because you bear fruit as God. You are in His image. You are imitating Him. You're showing the same steadfast love that He shows to us. Now, with these comparisons, let's go back to the scarlet cord. And I think this just kind of like cinches it all up, right? Again, people have wondered, what is the significance of the scarlet cord? And when I read Bible stories, and I get just this little detail, oh, the scarlet cord, that bothers me. Why are we given that detail? And so I started digging, and this is what I think is going on with the scarlet cord. You might say I'm crazy. I think it makes sense, right? Remember Achan's genealogy. We have Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah. We have Achan mentioned a couple of other times, and notice that he's the son of Carmi, But 2 other times we're told specifically Achan is the son of Zerah. Again, in 22:20, did not Achan the son of Zerah? So the author is reminding us a few times to make this connection between Achan and Zerah specifically. Now, let's rewind. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 38 real quick. We have the story of Judah and Tamar, which is also kind of an interesting story where a prostitute-like woman shows herself to be more righteous than an Israelite. The basics of the story, because we're not going to read the whole thing. Judah has a son named He marries Tamar. But is evil, and what happens to him?
Dies.
He dies. So, who's next in line to marry Tamar?
The next son.
The next son, Onan. But Onan's no better than and he dies. And so Judah's starting to do the math. I only got 4 of them, at least at this point, I think. Got 3 of them. 2 of them have already died. We got the third in line, Shelah. I don't know if he's going to be much better of a guy than his older 2 brothers. So Tamar, you just need to wait it out. And so Tamar waits it out. And Tamar starts figuring out he's not going to do what's right. He is not going to give me as a wife to Shelah as he should. And so Tamar conducts this plan. She dresses up as a prostitute. She gets Tamar or Judah to sleep with her. She keeps his signet ring, his staff, and his cord. Judah has no idea that he slept with his daughter-in-law, Tamar. Tamar eventually becomes pregnant. Judah's outraged. Let her be burned for her whoring, her prostitution. And Tamar comes out with his cord, his staff, and his signet and says, the man who owns these, this is who got me pregnant. And Judah says, she is more righteous than I am. Interesting connection as far as, a Gentile woman, a prostitute, is more righteous than an Israelite man. Oh, and there's the verse right there for you. She is more righteous than I. Now, this is what happens when Tamar gives birth. When the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand. And the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out. And she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. Therefore, his name was called Perez. Afterward, his brother came out with the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Achan's great-grandfather, who we're told a number of times, that's who Achan is from. My best guess with the scarlet cord shows, hey, Zerah, he's a son of Judah. Rahab has that symbol now. She is one of Judah's descendants. And in fact, you look at the genealogy of Christ in Matthew chapter 1, and who are the first 2 women of 4 in total that are in that genealogy? Tamar and Rahab. So it's as if there's literally a scarlet thread connecting these women to Jesse and David the king, all the way down to Jesus. So there's my theory on why God felt the need to mention the scarlet cord. I thought it was really cool, but I just kind of geek out like that sometimes. Arian was kind of like, okay. But this is why I preach. I geek out on stuff like this. Yeah, there we go. Matthew 1:3. Judah, the father of Perez, and Zerah by Tamar. And then later on, Salmon, the father of Boaz by Rahab. And Boaz, the father of Obed by Ruth. And Obed, the father of Jesse. Jesse, the father of David. So on and so forth down to Jesus. So not only is Rahab an outsider who has come in, God puts her in the genealogy of Jesus. Rahab's blood is coursing through Jesus in a sense. So I thought that was pretty neat. So, exactly. And so again, it's just another indication that Rahab has the symbol of Judah's family now, or at least Zerah's family. Achan, he's devoted to destruction. And I think the constant reminder, Achan, son of Zerah. No, he's son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah. No, look at Zerah. Oh, back in Genesis 38. Cool, okay, got it. That's what I see at least. So as far as application goes, like what do we do with this story? Again, I think it makes the conquest more palatable to modern tastes. If Rahab could have joined God's people, any one of those Gentiles could have as well. And as we are looking out to the world, and as we are looking to bring people into God's kingdom, don't we make those distinctions? I like to ask this question for one of my lessons. Let's all imagine we're back in high school. It's the last day of senior year, and you're just got the evangelistic zeal going. There's a fire burning in your heart, and it's lunch, and you want to talk to someone. Well, at one table is the Mormon kid. You think, okay, that guy needs to be saved, just like anybody else. On the other side of the cafeteria is the vicious atheist who has been outspokenly against God and Christians in general. Which one do you go to? Which one do you think will have a greater chance of success in conversion? Now, generally when I ask that question, most people say, well, probably the Mormon, because we at least agree that there is a God and that Jesus is real and all this kind of stuff. The atheist, though, he kind of gets left out. And to me, that's kind of an indication that we in general, not saying this is true of all of us, kind of make those distinctions. Well, he's already close enough. He just needs to make a few more steps into God's people. That guy, though, he's way too far off. Ugh, too much work, never going to happen, wasted energy. We make those distinctions, and Achan and Rahab show us, doesn't matter how close you are. If you don't obey God, you're out. Rahab shows us, doesn't matter how far you are, you can be brought in. Austin.
Another thing in similar vein is that Rahab more easily understood the state of her soul when she heard who God was. And so in that same analogy of atheist versus someone who's got some basis in some version of the Bible, one of those two, after hearing who God is, will understand themselves to not be saved. One will still try and twist it so that they are.
The Mormon, being convicted that God is true, might simply think, I'm close enough. The atheist, if he is convicted that God is true, quickly realizes that he is an enemy, just like Rahab and all of Jericho realized when they started hearing about God. Denise.
I would like to know what your thoughts are on why God chose Joshua as a replacement for Moses, since he was not a lineage to Moses, he was actually an assistant
Yeah.
to Moses' son.
We don't know why that relationship between Joshua and Moses started, but Joshua is actually present throughout the book of Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, with Moses all the time. He was the right-hand man. He actually went up on the mountain with Moses. Everybody else was down worshiping the golden calf, except for Joshua and Moses. So Joshua was just kind of a standout guy in general. In fact, his first appearance is in Exodus chapter 17. He's Israel's first general. He leads the Israelites into battle in their very first one. So Joshua is just, there is never anything negative about Joshua, except for maybe the Gibeonites. And I also think it's pretty interesting, Joshua in Hebrew would be Yeshua. Yeshua in Greek, Iesus, which in English, Jesus. Jesus and Joshua share the same name. And maybe it's just a common name. Maybe it's like, hey, Joshua, you're a cool dude. Jesus is going on his own conquest, but bringing people in like Rahab. There's my 2 cents. All right, next week, Judges chapter 3, the story of Ehud, one of my new favorites. Thank you.
Good evening. Good to see everyone. Good to be with you this evening. Before we're dismissed in prayer, a few announcements. John and Brandy, as we mentioned on Sunday, out of town in Montana for a couple weeks, so they're not with us. Art and Renee are back, so good to have you guys back. In terms of sick, Carter is back with us, so good to see him feeling better. I noticed he's got a summer haircut there. Most of his hair's gone back there.
I made a mistake.
Yeah, not a problem. Looks good. Kathy is not with us this evening. She has a bit of an eye condition, and she received, I hate cringe even saying this, but a shot to help with that. So she's not with us, recovering from that. Continue also to remember Kim Emerson and his struggles, Susie's dad, and Ellie in her recovery from surgery. Also remember this Sunday, Arkansas, 4 p.m. we'll have a singing, so be prepared to join us there. And a couple announcements of family members of our members. Hayden's dad, Hayden's home for the summer, but his dad has had surgery. He's being diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer and has been treated for that. So remember Hayden's dad and all of their family. And then upcoming surgery, remember Tim Roberts, Steve's brother. Tim is going to have open heart surgery on the 27th of this month. If I got that right, Steve? Okay. So remember Tim in the upcoming prayer there. Then, as we mentioned on Sunday, if you haven't seen it, in your box are the class assignments coming up that we will begin in July. So one of the questions I was asked, the class teachers will remain the same for all 3 quarters that we're going to have. So Craig, Morgan, and Tommy will teach, and we will rotate through those classes. So in case you had questions about that, that's the plan. Okay, and I thought we were going to have an elders deacons meeting coming up, but we're not quite sure when we're all or most of us will be in town. So we'll try to figure that out and let you guys know on Sunday when we're going to have that scheduled. Okay, anything else before we close this evening? Okay, let's have a good week.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here tonight. Thank you for letting us study your word and worship your name. Be with us as we leave tonight and continue to be the light out in the world. Please let us remember the story of Rahab and Achan and use it out in the world. Please be with those who aren't here today, those who are traveling, and those recovering. Let them get back to health. Thank you for all you have blessed us with and all you provide. We thank you for the gift of salvation through your Son. In your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.